Mr. Okamoto, wonderful to have you on. I must speak, as Eric Martin addressed in his article on you last week, the very different skill set you bring versus the heritage of the position for America. And that is people with Wall Street experience like John Lipsky, or maybe it's people with the right pedigree of economics like your predecessor, David Lipton. You are going to be different. In what way will you be different as a first deputy managing director representing the interests of America?
Well, thanks, Tom. It's great to be here this morning, and I'm enjoying the new format. Look, I think it's no surprise that or no shock that I do come with a different set of skills and a different background. It starts from the position that I have a lot of respect for my predecessors, knowing John and having immense respect and kinship with David Lipton, who I still talk with. But look, I think what we need now is somebody who's going to be trying to bring the world together on these critical issues. We didn't anticipate a pandemic before I started in this role. We're here now, and I think since I've arrived, we've been moving quickly to try and build relationships across institutions in the multilateral framework and also bilaterally with our key countries and partners. That's what's going to be effective in not only responding to the health side of this, but also on the economics, which for some countries is just as important or even more important.
Right. So much of this, and you mentioned bilaterally, is the new non-multilateral relationship of President Trump to the world. You're representing essentially an administration that is decidedly not multilateral. Ms. Georgieva has pushed against that aggressively. How does the United States address a multilateral institution if it doesn't believe in the underlying theory?
I think, what the U.S. wants is an effective multilateral framework, and certainly that's something that I worked on quite a bit when I was in the U.S. administration. I'm very proud to be in the current slot that I'm in now, which is trying to knit this up better and to make our programming more effective. This is a huge challenge. One thing that we've had to deal with, as I think we all have in this crisis, is move with incredible speed. So we were talking a bit about markets and market reactions, but really some of the optimism in the market is reflected in the fact that institutions like ours have moved with incredible speed and at an incredible scale.
Right.
That's unprecedented in our history.
Yeah, well, in our history, Geoffrey, the history of the International Monetary Fund is simple. They are there really as a crisis policymaker of last resort and usually offer what are considered not draconian, but very strict terms to any country that is in real need. Right now, a lot of countries don't want to deal with the former IMF regime. Can you recommend to the managing director that this needs to be a kinder and gentler IMF?
I think the conversation Crystalline and I have been having with countries is this is not your father's or even your grandfather's IMF. We are approaching the world in the context of this pandemic in a new way. A lot of that you can see in how we are provisioning our facilities for emergency finance at this point in time, which is, we're telling countries we're very frank, spend what you have to at this point, but please keep the receipts. And we're going to be holding countries accountable on the back end for this, but we're not second guessing some of the decisions they have to make in terms of spending on critical health priorities and social safety nets.
I spoke to David Malpass of the World Bank about this question, but that was before we dragged 2047 into 2020. How will you advise the managing director, and maybe over the phone or a walk down to the Hay Adams, how will you advise the Trump administration to deal with this issue of Hong Kong?
I think my role in this, and I think our institution's role in this, is not to involve too much in the geopolitics. What we're looking at this from is from an economic perspective, and one thing that is for certain is Hong Kong is an incredibly important financial and commercial trading hub, not just to the world, but also to China and to the United States. That's underpinned by a series of policies that have been built up over time, whether it's credible monetary authority, a well-regulated banking sector, a strong reserve position. These are the kinds of things that we'll be looking at when we see about where Hong Kong is headed from here. And clearly, the outlook for Hong Kong, while it's a little unclear at this point or too early to judge given recent developments, is relevant in terms of the global economic outlook.
One of the things we know, and this is for our radio listeners nationwide and also television as well, Mr. Okamoto, we come to a point where we say, when's the next cash call on the United States? How do you observe the fiscal structure of the IMF right now? And will you need to go to President Trump and to Capitol Hill looking for more resources?
You know, it's an interesting perspective. I think one way we look at it is a little bit different, which is we're entering into this crisis better resourced than we have in any prior crisis. And so we have $1 trillion in financial firepower that, you know, we are ready and able to deploy. That's being deployed in real time today. Right now, given some of the more pessimistic projections that we have, we think we have the sufficient resources that we need to carry out our role in this. Obviously, we are encouraged by the good amount of international cooperation that's come behind some of our recent requests for resources. For example, fundraising campaigns to help some of our poorest countries, which have gone met. So that's a good thing, and that bodes well for any future needs we may have.
Geoffrey, one final question, if I may, and this goes back to the heritage of the United States and with our economic counselors at the IMF, now Gita Gopinath there, but I'll go back to the time of Kenneth Rogoff of Harvard and, of course, to the great Rudy Dornbush of MIT long ago and far away. The fundamental difference right now in these crises, plural, is we have much more of a floating rate regime versus the fixed nature that we had in the 50s and the 60s. Give us your opinion of dollar strength or dollar weakness. Which is most efficacious for America?
You know, I'll let the president and the Treasury Secretary speak on where they think the dollar should be at any given point in time. I think what's important here is that the Fed is doing all that it can to support financial markets, both through monetary policy and through some of its financing operations that are forthcoming jointly with the Treasury Department. This is obviously we enter into this world, as you said, with flexible exchange rates that allows flexible exchange rates to be part of the buffers that help countries weather this. For some countries, though, this is the first time they're having to use some of these tools. And so that's where our advice, paired with our, as you put it, these icons of the IMF, historic expertise and a wealth of knowledge, gets deployed on the ground to help countries in real time.